Hey folks, so this is End Poverty Regina's first ever live interview with Peter Gilmer of the Regina Anti-Poverty Ministry. Now at End Poverty Regina meetings, we spend a lot of time explaining to people how the social assistance system works, what programs are there, and catching people up with what we're talking about. So we've been talking a long time about setting up some basic background information. We'll be posting a document with that and links to the social assistance policy manuals and that and excerpting it so that people can come to meetings well informed and ready to talk about the actions that we need to take. So I'm going to flip the camera over and we'll start with talking to Peter, and so be prepared for some possible glitches here, but let's see what happens. So, we've got you on camera now, Peter.
Okay.
So, we start with the basics. You said there are there we go, 5 income assistance programs in Saskatchewan.
Yes, they are the Saskatchewan Assistance Plan, or what we refer to as SAP, the Transitional Employment Allowance, or T, the Saskatchewan Assured Income for Disability, or the SED program, the Saskatchewan Rental Housing Supplement, and the other supplement program is the Saskatchewan Employment Supplement. So the Saskatchewan Assistance Plan is the traditional income assistance program in Saskatchewan, and it is for those individuals and families who have very limited income or no income. What we know about it is that a majority of people who are on the program are persons either with disabilities or other significant barriers to employment, and all of them have some form of special need. It is a very inadequate program in terms of the benefits that it provides, and indeed all the programs, all the income assistance programs in Saskatchewan, that's one thing that they all have in common, is that they are woefully inadequate. They're difficult to access and often difficult to maintain as well. But the adult basic allowance on the Saskatchewan Assistance Plan is only $255 a month. That's for food, clothing, personal and household items, and transportation. Beyond that, for shelter allowance, if a person is deemed to be employable, depending on what community they're in Saskatchewan, they would be receiving anywhere from $233 for their shelter allowance to a maximum of $328 in the larger cities and some other communities. That's for a single employable person. A person with a disability would receive between $326 and $459, depending on the community that they're in. A family with 2 children would receive between $429 and $711 in the top tier communities. So these are all very inadequate shelter allowance rates, but the combination of that shelter allowance and the basic allowance, basic adult allowance, are the primary benefits that people do receive. On SAP, you also do receive monies to pay your basic utilities. So you get full coverage for energy, power, and water, and $30 on top of that for telephone. In terms of assets, a person is allowed to keep is allowed to have $1,500 coming onto the system as an individual, $3,000 as a couple, and an additional $500 per person in the household after that. In terms of other exemptions, the wage exemption, if a person is deemed employable, they're only allowed to keep $50 of earned income plus 25% of the rest to a maximum of $200. If a person has a disability, they're allowed to keep $200 upfront and then 25% of the rest to a maximum of $325. The Saskatchewan Assistance Plan is deemed to be a program of last resort, so people are expected to do everything in their power to gain and maintain self-sufficiency. The other thing I would mention about SAP, and it's true of all the provincial income support programs, is that the benefits there isn't a child benefit per se, because children are expected to be covered under the national child benefit.
Okay, so a lot of numbers there.
Yes, I realize.
Do you have, say, and with the understanding, because you go to the website, it's incredibly complicated to figure out what a person's entitled to. Even the workers, this is inside information, get into arguments over what people are eligible for.
Right.
So, roughly, what does a single person with 2 children get in a month? Just very roughly.
Well, very roughly, I mean, if we're just speaking strictly about the provincial benefits, they would get their $255 adult allowance, and living in Regina or Saskatoon, they would also receive $711 for their shelter allowance. There is some potential provision for special needs like school supplies in the fall, etc. But it's an extremely limited amount of money.
So basically, you can expect under $1,000 a month.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. Now, I mean, and that's one of the reasons why the concern about the loss of the rental supplement, because potentially, families can also access the rental supplement, or a single parent with 2 children has been able to access the rental supplement, which would top up what they'd be allowed for shelter.
okay. So let's move on to the T program. What's the T program?
Well, as inadequate as the Saskatchewan Assistance Plan is, the Transitional Employment Allowance, or T as we refer to it, is the least adequate of the income assistance programs. Depending on the community that a person lives in, it only provides between $468 to $563 for Regina and Saskatoon. And this is to meet all your needs as an individual, except for your utilities, which have a capped rate. They don't pay actual cost of utilities necessarily as they do with the Saskatchewan Assistance Plan. Now, the T program is identified as the program for employable people who are deemed to be job ready. So the expectation is that people will not be on the program for very long. What we have seen, though, is that it's become the default income assistance program that many people are being steered to, I believe, is a cost saving. And so what we've seen in the course of just a few years is the T numbers rising in Saskatchewan from less than 1,500 to roughly 6,500 people on the T program now. So that's a combination of 2 things. There's certainly been a downturn in the economy, so there's more people on T due to that, but at the same time, the expectation, or as I said, it's the default program, so many people that probably shouldn't be on T. And to be honest, we've long taken the position that there should be no T program just because of its inadequacy. But a lot of people who are on the T program, because it's something that the assessment is done over the phone through the call center, is that many people have hidden disabilities or disabilities that aren't picked up, that haven't been identified through a medical, etc., or in many ways are not job ready, and so unfortunately they're being left on a program which pays incredibly inadequate benefits.
So what would be an example of not job ready? Say, back in March, one of the headline articles was too many able-bodied people on assistance. So what would make them not job ready?
Well, I know that over the years, one of the things that we've noticed with people who've been assessed, the T has been the program that's been identified for them for income support, is that often they're, when they come to our office and we have an opportunity to speak to them, we know that there are mental health or other disabilities that are in play that haven't been identified. But also, what we know now is that a lot of pregnant mothers right around maternity are being kept on the program, and really that's the pressure to be accessing employment at that time is probably not the right route to be going. So that's very problematic.
What about age?
Yeah, that was the other thing that we noticed. And it used to be that for people between the age of 50 and 65, when they're able to access their old age benefits, or their Social Security benefits, that age group was deemed to be only partially employable, and so automatically was not placed on the T program. Many of our T clients now are people who are in their late 50s and early 60s, so that's been a significant transition that we've seen as well.
Yeah, and the federally, I know I can't name the ministry, I'll put it in the comments later, noted that nearly a third of poor Canadians are in that age group.
Right. Yeah, it's certainly, and that's one thing that we've noticed in terms of our casework over the years, is that while, there's perhaps not surprises in terms of other categories where there's an overproportion of people that we're working with, whether that's Indigenous people with disabilities, single parent families. Those are all groups that we deal with on a very regular basis. But another part of our a high number of people on our caseload that doesn't get talked about a lot is the people between the ages of roughly 55 and 65 in particular, and single people in that category. We find that a lot of them are in poverty, and that they're having to deal with income assistance programs that are inadequate.
Okay, and one quick note for those of you who are catching us live, and even those of you catching us later on, feel free to put questions in the comments. We'll do our best to answer them, and we'll keep going. So we'll move on to SAD,
Yes.
Saskatchewan Assured Income for Disability.
Yes, and this is the program that is for people who have been assessed as having enduring and significant disabilities, so permanent disabilities, and really in most cases severe disabilities. Once again, while it does provide a better benefit than the other programs, it is still inadequate to meet most basic needs, and many of the cuts that we've seen in recent years will impact people on the SAID program. In terms of benefits, it provides a general living allowance which wraps together shelter and other basic needs, and depending on community in Saskatchewan, that benefit is between $931 a month and $1,064 per month. It incorporates the same shelter allowance, and this is important in terms of what we're seeing in terms of the loss of the rental supplement. It incorporates the same shelter allowance as what people in the SAP program receive. But what it does do is it provides an additional $350 for the adult basic allowance, which is wrapped into the general living allowance. It can cover full cost of utilities, and it has the same exemption rates. The wage exemption and asset exemptions are the same as the Saskatchewan Assistance Plan, with one exception. On said, people are allowed to potentially keep up to $100,000 in inheritance, but beyond that, the assets and wage exemptions, earned income exemptions are the same.
Okay, so with inheritance, though, it's under a very specific set of circumstances, and people are restricted in what they're allowed to use that money for.
That's right, yeah. That being said, I mean, one of our concerns is, while we're glad that there is at least some exemption and that more significant exemption on inheritances, that a wide range of other things do not have the same kind of level of exemption. So, for instance, land claim settlements, or residential school claims, or exemptions for human rights settlements, that these don't get covered to the same degree. So ideally we would have a much higher asset exemption, but a broader scope. I think it's also important that along with the earned income exemption, which has been very low and has meant that people couldn't transition into, had a hard time with the kind of costs of moving into employment, is that it's that hasn't changed for many years. And I think in both cases we need to have actual indexing processes. Once we've improved the asset and wage exemptions, that we need to be indexing them so that they don't get stuck at these rates for a long time. One thing I would mention, just taking a step backwards onto T, is that's the other thing with T, is that it has no earned income exemption whatsoever. So SED and SAP, at least they're allowed to keep a little bit of earned income. With the T program, you can't keep a cent.
So shovel sidewalks after a storm, you get $20 a pop, you've got to report that, and they take every penny
Yeah,
back.
they would, yeah. Yeah, every cent. And I should mention too that with SAP and SED, the only exemption for gifts is $200 a year. So any gifted money beyond $200 in an annual period gets clawed back as well.
So,
and T, you're not allowed to keep any of these things.
So if you get Christmas money, theoretically you're supposed to report that.
That's right.
So that would make people who don't welfare cheats, right?
Yes, it's supposed. I mean, basically, for survival's sake, it forces people into making difficult choices. And I mean, the reality is that there's very little true welfare fraud that goes on. I know in our office we handle over 2,000 cases per year and over 2,300 in the last year. And of those, there was 2 cases that in any way had a connection to welfare fraud. So it's not the issue that many people think that it is.
Okay. All right. Now, you were going to talk a little bit about the rental housing supplement and the employment supplement. Let's start with the employment supplement, because it's pretty straightforward at the moment.
Yeah. So with the employment supplement, this provides a small top-up to low-income parents who are receiving income from either employment or child or spousal maintenance. If they're receiving more than $125, they're able to potentially access the Saskatchewan Employment Supplement. The employment supplement operates on a bell curve for low-income households with children. So the maximum amounts that get paid out where people are roughly in between $1,125 and $1,820. And the maximum amount that a person can receive on the supplement with one child would be $312.50 and $500 for 4 children. But as I said, it's a bell curve, so up to $1,100, people are getting less in terms of their income. Up to $1,100, they get less from the employment supplement, and after $1,800, it would be declining.
Okay. Now, on the T program, you don't get any exemptions. But you need to earn a minimum of $125 to be eligible for the employment supplement. So to earn that $125, the $125 gets clawed back, but you get a little bit from the housing supplement.
Well, you can potentially...
employment supplement, sorry.
Yeah, you can, I mean, it's a very confusing system, but at the end of the day, people would be better off if they could be able to keep their employment income in that circumstance. And we've always felt it's extremely ironic that a program called the Transitional Employment Allowance, which gives the suggestion that it's about transitioning people into employment, is clawing back the very first dollar that a person earns.
Indeed. Okay, now
the big one.
The rental housing supplement.
Yeah, well, this is the big issue of this year's provincial budget. And the Saskatchewan Rental Housing Supplement is a program that assists low-income families with children and persons with disabilities with their rental costs. Depending on the community that people are in, it provides a maximum benefit of between $186 to $256. And I will just mention that I know that on the rate cards it does say $262 is a maximum for Tier A or larger communities, but the reality is the way that the system operates is that it's next to impossible to get the full 262. So we would suggest that 256 is the actual maximum there. In terms of families that's for a single disabled person. For a family with 2 children, they're able to receive they would receive maximums of $184. In smaller communities, up to $305 in Tier A or Regina and Saskatoon. But the big thing now is that they're saying as of July 1st of 2018 that there will be no more new applications for the rental supplement. And I have many concerns with this. I mean, we saw over the course of the 2016 and 2017 budgets, 11 announced cuts to income assistance programs. Of those, 3 ended up being grandfathered. A couple were backed off on, and the cut to funeral and viewing coverage was partially, not fully, but partially restored. But of all the cuts that we've seen over the course of the last 3 budgets, this is the one that really is the deepest cut of all. It's basically taking $5 million out of the hands of low-income households in Saskatchewan. By social services' own formula, it's taking away 30% of the rental income that people are provided on income assistance programs, which is huge. The rationale that's been given for the cut is that vacancy rates are rising and therefore rents should be declining or stabilizing. The reality is that rents certainly aren't dropping, and they would actually have to drop drastically for people to be able to afford accommodations without the supplement. Those who are losing the supplement are going to be hit extremely hard. The other thing too is that we noticed early on in 2018, we were getting a lot of client calls from single persons with disabilities who were saying that their rental supplement, based on their last review, was now being cut off because it was suddenly decided that their accommodations no longer met their disability needs. So what, I don't think it's a coincidence that we saw this number of people that were being cut off just before they make it impossible to get back onto the program. So a lot of people there are going to lose out. So ultimately, this was a very cruel budget decision, and there's been a lot of cruel decisions, but I would suggest that this is going to be the one that has the biggest impact. When a couple of years ago, when they announced that they were going to be cutting the extra living allowance for people on the Saskatchewan Assured Income for Disability, there was huge panic amongst those people receiving it, and tremendous hardship ultimately for those people who lost it. But in terms of actual percentages or amounts that people are going to be losing, they on average are going to be losing more with the cut to the rental supplement than they lost with the extra living allowance. So certainly, if there was given that there was a considerable fight back there, and they ultimately grandfathered the extra living allowance for those people that were keeping it or that had it, I would suggest that there is going to have to be a major fight, and that people are going to be very upset when the impacts of this hit home.
Now, with the grandfathering on the original, we do know that there were some sneaky workarounds where grandfathering means provided your circumstances don't change. What constitutes a change in circumstance?
Well, a change in circumstance includes, there's a lot of things, but if a person goes briefly off the system for whatever reason, due to other income or anything, when they come back on, they wouldn't be able to access it. And this is true of the employment supplement for families with children over the age of 12, because that was another area that was impacted by recent budgets. But in both cases, a change of circumstance could include being off the system. One that we've been very concerned about and being an appeal on has been the issue of people who've had to make a move. So a move is a change of circumstance. So when you move to other accommodations, you will lose it. We've had some success at appeals, but frankly, we've lost more than we've won for people who lost based on a move, even if that move was completely beyond their control.
Okay, so, and even prior to that, something that we had discussed was the impact. Part of the rental housing supplement for people with disabilities involves getting a home inspection.
Right.
And periodically, even if you're already on the program, you could be audited and subject to a home inspection. Would you like to talk about that?
Yes. Well, I mean, and this is where we've seen that people have been cut off based on the home inspection, but even on an interview of their circumstances in the reporting period, that there's suddenly been a higher threshold in terms of an accommodation meeting disability needs. And so we're very concerned that the people that have lost the supplement for whatever reason are never going to be able to get it back, and it'll be a situation of tremendous hardship. Now, it seems like there has been some rumblings that this grandfathering clause may not include a change of circumstance clause. I can't say that, I can't guarantee that that's the case. But regardless, there is a history of this government grandfathering and then making attempts to get rid of the grandfathering. So I'm deeply concerned for the people who presently have the program, who have the rental supplement as well, but certainly for all those people who will be needing to access the supplement in the future and are going to be left. I mean, let's look at the numbers here. A single disabled person is now going to be left with $459 to pay their rent. Single mother with 2 children is going to have $711 to pay their rent. That's just not possible in this rental market. So it's going to create tremendous hardship, and it does need to have a fight back, and there will be a fight back.
Okay. I think that's a very good start. We'll wrap up with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.